a lot of us operate, spend our time, do business on these platforms, and we should have some sort of say in terms of like the rules of these platforms, whereas right now we don't. And I don't think that's right. When I was like 3 or 4 or 5, the only access to information that I had was like through books that my parents would give me, or like puzzles, or like that kind of stuff, you know. And then maybe through TV, maybe in the morning from like a certain time, I'd be able to learn things on TV shows, shout out to Tube, or I'd be able to like watch Dragon Ball Z and learn about whatever. But that time was like very limited. Whereas like kids that grew up, like that are born this year, have access to like any information, any content, everything from the day that they breathe their first breath to like their entire existence. They're going to have access. So my theory is that those kids are going to be way more intelligent than what we are, because they have access to so much more. And whenever they have a question, they'll be able to go and like find the answer to that question and just like look it up. Whereas we didn't, like, we are a little bit behind in that. And I know Tahir is probably a bit different for you, but like for me, I only got my first phone that had like proper internet. Like I was only able to start watching YouTube videos that weren't at like 1080p, maybe when I was like 14 or 15. Now I can't like begin to understand what a kid that's 6 years old who has an iPad is able to like consume compared to what I was when I was 6. But my assumption is that that kid is going to learn a lot more. So I think because they have that access, they will be much more better equipped to be able to figure out solutions to these issues as they go along. But I think for now, what's super important is to realize the power and how like these algorithms are a tool. But I think if we're going to be the users of these platforms, if we're going to be the majority of the people that are like on these platforms and affected by them, we should be the ones who are able to decide what exactly these algorithms are going to be used to achieve. Because right now, what they're being used to achieve is to make money for the company who owns the platform. But in my mind, if we're going to look at like virtual reality compared to reality, in reality, we have agency, we have the ability to make decisions, and we have abilities to choose what kind of societies we operate in and what we want from those societies. And that's through the democratic system. You get to vote who you want to rule the country, and they'll implement the sort of like rules and legislation that majority of people agree upon. And in the digital space, it's basically like the Wild West, bro. Like we living in this digital space, but there's no rules. The rules that are decided are made by the people who own the platforms. And it's essentially, the way I think of it is sort of like, it's sort of like way back when we had kingdoms, where you had a king and whatever the king said is what happened kind of situation. And then the king would have to like try and make sure to keep the people happy so that they don't revolt. But then a lot of the time it would create a system with like really messed up shit was happening. And I think that's kind of where we are in terms of like the digital space. Like we don't have the agency to be able to decide what kind of rules or algorithms Twitter upholds, because it's a private company. So we have no say in that. And I don't think that's right, because a lot of us operate, spend our time, do business on these platforms, and we should have some sort of say in terms of like the rules of these platforms, whereas right now we don't. And I don't think that's right. I'm going to be running for president in 2030. If anyone wants to join my party, you can check me out on Instagram. No, I'm joking.
Nah, but you make a valid point, bro, and I think it's a very interesting one. One has to really consider all of it. But I look at it as, my only argument would be against that would be like, one, it's a resource, right? The internet is a resource. This whole thing it's a resource and a privilege and a curse and all things, which to me resemble a resource similar to like alcohol, right? So one can find its many good uses and why it's an amazing situation, but one can also substantially find like equally, I would say, why it's so bad for you and why you should not, engage in it. And obviously you'll find that fine line of people saying using it in moderation obviously is the way to go. And if you understand, it's that thing of not letting your vices be the best of you. I think it's the same with the internet, man. We can go bar for bar as to why it's such an amazing platform and why it's beautiful and how it helps. Similar to the algorithm and all these kind of features that come with it. But we can also find a way to figure out like how it's such a bad place for you. I think similarly, it probably levels itself out quite well. And just to touch on Tahir's thing, he said like one has to figure out how to do breaks and stuff. I think more than anything, it's more challenging the relationship that people have with these platforms, with these resources that we found. With like with anything that we had to learn how to master it and fully understand it and navigate it. I think us as social media managers and people who focused on content creation were forced to do nothing but understand it like the back of our hands, how it works, how social media works, how you get something to trend or what people flock towards, how to anticipate trends. So obviously we will have a knack of understanding how to use it, and that will inevitably impact our personal lives and our relationship with social media. But I think it's the same. Like one really just needs to understand the relationship. So I would say, I think, for example, like the way one would combat that is for example, I don't know, we learn how to use the internet in terms of its features, but we don't learn how to use the internet in terms of when do you actually use it, when not to use it, when is it too much, you know what I mean? Like that I think that's probably like the better way in school. That would be the thing of, because it's like giving a kid a gun, being like, yeah, fire when in danger and fire and just put it on safety for the rest of the day. It's like, okay, but I'm actually going to do that. Do I know how to like cock the gun? Do I know how to, you know what I mean? There's a lot that goes behind using the internet. It's not as simple as Google, stay away from XX videos. Like, that's not how it works. You have to literally like pretty much break down the relationship and the habits that are formed with social media. So it's not as easy as saying don't be on TikTok, for the whole day. It's more like, hey, what's on TikTok doesn't matter as much as what's happening in your real life. Like, step away from the computer for a second and actually check out what's going on. I didn't know that. It took me a very long time. It took me a very long time to learn that, hey, I'm dedicating way too much time into this virtual world that's consuming me, as opposed to actually developing something real that could actually benefit me in the long run in terms of my actual relationships with people. So it's one of those things where one has to, just have to navigate that and figure out how we actually educate the masses in terms of the relationship to internet. It's the same with the relationship to food. Food is beautiful, it's nice, but if you misuse it, it can go left really quickly. And I think that's the same with internet. It can go left if you just don't know how to navigate it. And it's a matter of teaching people the relationship. So not only what you should eat, but when you should eat, how you should eat, when are you hungry, when are you not hungry. It's that, it's just kind of another way of using the word for internet. But understanding everything that goes into that, I think, is very, very important. And I don't think a lot of people touch on that, which is very weird. It's only something I've figured out now, actually. It's a very weird thing that we haven't really touched on as a species, our relationship with the internet.